Right.
A little bit of different hook set styles, just how to apply those in your fishing. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We're going to do a 3-part series on hook sets, and this is going to be the first part of that. I just thought that it would be a good idea to cover, kind of a little bit of different hook set styles, when you use each one, and when, just how to apply those in your fishing. That's something that I feel like anglers make a mistake with. They, at times they're using too aggressive of a hook set, and other times they're not using enough of a hook set to really do the job, for the situation at hand. So the goal with that is to help you be a better angler and to help you put more of those bites into the boat. Once you've triggered that fish into biting, it's on you as the angler to make the proper hook set, to fight the fish well, to have the best opportunity to land that fish. And a lot of that does start with the actual hook set. So once you've detected the bite, setting the hook the right way is the way to do that. This is going to be, like I said, a 3-part series, and to really kind of go through a couple different ones. And I've kind of grouped them. Initially I was thinking about doing a bigger series with this, but as I went through it, I came to realize that several of these hook sets, with multiple bait styles, are actually very, very similar. So decided to group that down into 3 really, kind of different hook set styles, and kind of pair up those with the baits that really fit them. So this first one, probably the one I would say I catch the majority of my fish on throughout a fishing season, based on the way I like to fish, and just the way that I seem to be most effective in a lot of my fishing. And this hook set really covers a few different bait styles. For one, single hook moving baits is what I would call this bait style. Obviously a bladed jig falls into that, a spinner bait falls into that, a buzz bait would even fall into that. Not so much a swim jig necessarily, that will be in a different one, but yeah, open hook, single hook, moving baits falls into this, as well as all your crankbaits. Basically anything that has a treble hook on it that is subsurface. Jerk baits, lipless crankbaits, your standard crankbaits. Obviously, this is why this video gets a nod from me on being the one that I catch a lot of fish on throughout the year. The difference, or an exception to this rule, a treble hook subsurface bait that is not in this one, though, would be something like a glide bait, a single line through treble hook swim bait is going to be a little bit different hook set for me than what this one would be. So just to keep that in mind, kind of an exception to this rule, you could say, for the hook set. So similarities in these bait styles. These are all moving baits. The jerk bait would be a little bit different in the fact that you're jerking the bait and pausing it, but these are all moving baits for the majority of the retrieve, as well as the fact that they're open hook baits. Even like a bladed jig or a spinner bait, that's an open hook bait. You don't have a weed guard, you don't have plastic, you don't have anything covering the hook point. It's an exposed hook point. So you don't have to have that extremely aggressive hook set to drive the hook into that fish, just because you don't have anything actually blocking the point of the hook that you have to penetrate first before you get into that fish's mouth. So with this, it's going to be a more of a sweeping style hook set, and as well as using the reel. That's a big part of a hook set, especially with this one. I think a lot of people miss that part of it. They want to reel down with anything. That's a mistake I see people doing. They want to make every hook set kind of like you would on a jig or a plastic, where it's more of that reel down, take up the slack, and really drive the hook home. With a bladed jig, with a crankbait, so much of that for me is going to be basically a sweeping motion, where I'm fishing the bait along. A lot of times I'm going to have the butt of the rod kind of into my midsection. Depending on if I may be having the rod tip up where I'm fishing the bait, trying to keep it up off the bottom a little bit, or I'm in real shallow water. Could be a deep crankbait and I've got the rod pointed down, at the water surface. And so I've got the butt of the rod into my midsection. But either way, probably got the butt of the rod resting against my midsection in some capacity. I'm reeling along. I feel that fish bite. I'm going to continue reeling and pick up speed reeling as I twist my body away from wherever the fish is, you know. So I'm going to use the rod at that point to really just load up. Continue retrieving faster, taking up slack if that fish has pushed the bait to you, and leaning away from the fish, you know. So really trying to pull and load that rod up. That's so much of what this hook set is about, is just loading the rod. If you've got the right rod for the application, that's truly all you need to do. All of these are basically applications, thinking about it as well now, where I'm using straight fluorocarbon line. Fluorocarbon has a little bit of stretch to it. It's not monofilament, thankfully, but it's not braid either, where there is no stretch. So that little bit of stretch paired with a rod that is at least somewhat parabolic action, to a very parabolic action on a lot of my crankbaits, that combination, it allows for some give. So if you reel down and set the hook, you're actually not doing much. Using the reel to take up the slack and really just crank on that reel, that does more with that fluorocarbon line and that fairly parabolic rod to drive that hook into the fish more so than just what a hook set's going to do. So, you know, using all parts of this system together is what's going to make you very effective out there on the water and help you land more fish. A few little subtleties within this that I think I absolutely should mention. The bladed jigs and the crankbaits, crankbaits of any kind, I'm fishing those on a Bass Pro cranking stick. Different model for each one most of the time. On bladed jigs, I pretty much fish those on a 7.3 heavy, is what this is called. It's really not what you would consider a heavy action rod by any means. Like a heavy in the Platinum line is considerably stiffer than what the heavy is in this cranking stick. On the crankbaits, I'm pretty much fishing those on a medium heavy, sometimes a 7 foot, sometimes a 7.6, just depending on the application, if it's, you know, really distance casting or if it's closer quarters, shallower water type stuff. But the medium heavy gets the nod for me on the crankbaits. The other single hook moving baits fall into this category, and the rod that I fish those on is a Bass Pro Carbon Light 7 foot medium heavy. It's a little bit more a rod that doesn't have quite the parabolic action that the cranking stick does, but I use, again, a very similar hook set because of the difference in the rod action. So I don't have to change the hook set. What I physically do, the rod makes up the difference, just given the qualities of that rod. So again, using the right one for that application will help you a little bit more as well in landing those fish. One final thing that I think is important to note. Again, I mentioned that, you know, these are pretty much all things that I fish straight fluorocarbon on. I've talked about the rod a little bit, but the reel, for the buzz bait, spinner bait setup on that carbon light, as well as the bladed jig setup on the cranking stick, that is a situation where I always use the carbon light reel. 7:5 to 1 gear ratio is what I like for those baits, because sometimes, I mean, certainly you think the buzz bait is going to be something you fish a little bit quicker. And there's times definitely I fish the bladed jig and the spinner bait a little bit quicker. But a big thing with those, it seems like fish have a tendency to hit those and come at you a lot. And that little bit faster reel is something that helps me in that situation, just to take up line a little bit quicker, as well as you can put more heat on them, I think, with the single hook than you can the treble hook. The treble hook baits, you know, like a crankbait, like Slim or something on that cranking stick rod, I'm going to use on the Platinum reel, the Bass Pro Platinum reel, 6:8 to 1 gear ratio. Just a little bit slower. I think you get a little bit better feel, maybe a little bit better control with those baits of your speed on that slightly slower reel. So just kind of another little subtle difference there amongst those. But yeah, this rod, or this hook set is all about, a lot of it with the reel. Using that reel to take up the slack, load the rod, pulling it away from the fish, let the rod do the work, let the reel do the work, and really a twist of your body kind of at the midsection is what you're going for with this one.